My name is Mark Strickland, and you're listening to T-1NE Radio.
Hello, I'm Hezreel Robertson, and you're listening to T-1NE Radio, Pittsburgh's eclectic, positive, and underground Christian radio. This is all things jazz, and I'm here doing an interview with jazz great Mark Strickland. So how are you doing today, sir?
Doing pretty good. Glad to be here.
Okay, I was notified that I'd have these interviews this week, and I was really looking forward to interviewing both you and Miss Jessica Lee. So my first question is, what got you started playing music?
Well, way back when I started playing guitar, it was around 1963.
Okay.
All the kids in the neighborhood all had some kind of a skill that they could do. Like, some were great sports guys, some guys were great artists.
You know. Okay.
Some guys were good with the girls. Everybody needed to have a thing, man, back then, and there was a program in the neighborhood that offered drum and guitar lessons.
Okay.
So I signed up for the guitar lessons, and that's kind of how I kind of got into it initially. Now, there were a lot of people in the neighborhood who actually played. It was like it was like a traveling minstrel show. Guys would walk around the streets and play guitar and sing. So it was kind of a thing that was in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What was your favorite experience as a jazz artist or with jazz?
One of my favorite experiences was I used to go to this jam session with some of the older cats like Pete Henderson and Spencer Bay and a couple of other people. And when they offered me a job playing in their group, was like a huge thing for me, because before that I was into playing rhythm and blues and kind of rock and roll and that sort of thing. And I had been getting into jazz for the few years prior to that, and so I'd gone to their jam session, kind of hung out for a bit, kind of learned like what was going on. And so they appreciated the fact that I was so eager and very respectful of the guys before me, and and sadly the saxophone player Dickie Lilly had gotten cancer, and he wasn't able to make some of the gigs, and Pete Henderson asked me if I would play the front line with him. And so, I mean, his misfortune was kind of an opportunity for me to play, and that was probably one of the greatest moments for me.
I know you study guitar, so what artist do you feel influenced your playing style? You know, your tonality, I would say.
Well, because there were so many guys locally that you could go to the clubs and hear. I used to shoe shine, right? So that kind of gave me an in to getting into the bars, so I could see some of these guys playing guitar, Dolphus Bell and Larry McGee, and some of the guys that you know, locally that I looked up to. And so initially, those were my great influences. But after that, I started listening to George Benson.
Oh, okay.
Who I used to sneak into the Hurricane. And when George used to play there, and of course he was a huge influence on me, and Wes Montgomery and Kenny Burrell, some of those guys. That's where I got my voice.
Yeah, I know that. I feel like there's like tone with piano and saxophone, but there's something about guitar strings that just has that rounded, smooth feel, you know, especially when you're going up and down scales.
Well, you know, because guitar, and you know, I play a little piano myself, a little bit, and the difference is the fact that you can take the guitar wherever you go and sit down and play it, and you can feel the vibrations in your body, and it's just such a personal instrument, you know. I mean, of course, piano is a wonderful instrument. It covers a great range, so versatile. But the fact that the guitar is something that you can just pick up and play at your family's house or at a picnic or wherever you're at, it just brings that quality out of you because it's so personal. That's at least my feeling of it.
Yeah. I know sometimes when I feel down, I am a pianist, but sometimes I feel down, I prefer to play guitar. I like the way the vibrations feel, you know, when I'm strumming it or just picking it.
Yes. I tell my students that. I said, you know, don't just practice for the sake of practicing. Just pick it up and strum it. If you're watching TV, just strum it and play the guitar. Become friends with the guitar. It'll become friends with you. The music is like a part of you, part of your everyday life. Your personality comes out through your instrument. So.
I know that you are working with the Dream Makers, I believe.
Yes.
And what is it that you do with them? I think it's a mentorship. So tell me more about that.
Well, my participation in the program was I had a young man a year ago, and he wanted to learn more about the ins and outs of recording, you know, auto recording. And something about music production. And he had this notion, as you know, that some young people do, that it's just a simple thing. You know, you just get this recorder and then you go sample a couple of things and then you just tweak the voice or something and you make a loop out of it. And I said, there's a lot more involved with it, aside from the fact that you have to be musical.
Right.
You have to know which wire goes to which connection. You have to know which plug-in to use in order to get reverb or digital delay, as you well know, and compression. And so I my contribution was that I kind of gave him an introduction. It was over, I believe, 3 or 4 weeks that I had him for 2 hours for each one of those sessions. And I was able to give him sort of an introduction to what it means to be a recording engineer and some basic production tips.
Where do you see jazz going, and what are you doing to try to help move jazz forward and to progress? I know there's a lot of different genres that are out right now, you know, but how do you see it evolving with the new times, and how do you want to help it progress in that direction?
I certainly see that it is evolving, and there was a period of time that I was concerned that it was evolving in a way that it was counterproductive to what I thought the natural flow, the course of jazz should take. Now, of course, that's always the way it kind of is. The generation before always looks at the generation after like they're missing something.
Right.
But there was a period of time, I'd say between the 70s and the 80s, maybe the 80s to the 90s, where the music kind of changed and it started to go towards the digital, where the kids were getting more into like the turntables and less involved with actually making the music, as they were taking what was already done and kind of changing it around, which I think is good too. But I thought that we had lost a whole generation, and but happily I found that there is a new generation of musicians who are not unlike yourself, who are into actually playing an instrument and dedicating their life and their time to researching what was there before.
Right.
You stand on the shoulders of giants in order to move the thing forward. You know, it's really hard to figure out where you're going if you don't really know where you came from.
Right.
And so my contribution, I think, is I'm kind of at that point in my life. I'm 62 years old, so I was at that point where the older guys shared their experiences with me from the 40s and the 50s, and I can share my experience with them. it's secondhand, but the information is still being passed on to the generation after. And there is a certain element of that, of the musicians out there now that actually are interested in where the music came from, and all the people that were involved, and all the people that were here in Pittsburgh. You start to name the list of the people that were here, you know, actually when I was a kid. There was so many guys. The Turrentine brothers were here, and you know, of course Ray Brown, and you know, Billy Eckstein. Well, of course those guys were all gone when I was a kid, but just to talk about that is so exciting, and you know, I'm just so excited to share that with them, and to see their eyes light up when you say, "Yeah, man, George Benson lived on the hill, man."
Right, yeah.
Really? Yeah, man, I used to go down to the Hurricane, man, before he was George Benson, you know. And man, it's exciting, and I feel that because I'm in that unique position, you know, I feel it's a responsibility, but I do it happily, especially for the ones that are receptive to that.
What tip would you give for a young person coming up, you know, with some of their soloing? And that is, what's your approach to soloing? You know, what's going through your mind when you're staring down, you know, something like Cherokee or something like that?
You know, one day, and I'll make this brief, but one day I used to work at the Manchester Craftsmen's Guild, and I used to pick up all the musicians from the airport, and I would bring them to the guild, and then I would take them downtown to stay at that time it was called the Vista Hotel. And I had the honor of getting Dizzy Gillespie in the car, just me and Diz, sitting in the car talking, and I asked him that question. I can't exactly say what he said to me, but I can approximate that he said, "Man, you can't think that fast." He said, "Man, I think about what makes me happy, man. I think about my girl." But I think what he was saying in saying that was, at least my take on that is, whatever's on your mind, that's what you play. If you start thinking in terms of intervals and flatted ninths and sharp nines, it comes out that way. It becomes like painting by the numbers. 1 to 2, 2 to 3. I mean, you ultimately get the general shape of it, but it doesn't feel like anything.
Yeah.
You have to go outside the lines. You have to make a mistake. You have to search. And searching requires you to be a bold and daring person, to search inside of yourself. Sometimes there are places inside of yourself that you don't want to look.
Yeah.
You got to look there. You got to open those doors, kick them wide open, see what's in there, try it. If it doesn't work, turn it into something. You're only a half step away from playing something that's right. So,
yes, sir.
My approach is to be bold, be daring, but also be knowledgeable. Listen to other people, listen to their conversation musically, and try to take a few things from them. It's just like when you're a child, the way we learn to speak is not the way they teach it to us in school. Your mother tells you, okay, you want something to eat? And then you learn what that means. And then as you get older, your vocabulary begins to grow. You begin to be more sophisticated. You get older, and then you have to work in the workplace, and so your vocabulary has to change and adapt to that situation. When you're in church, you have to be able to adapt and talk in that way, that framework. And it's kind of like that with music. When the conversation presents itself, you have to join that conversation.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for coming on
Oh, it was my great
All Things
pleasure,
Jazz.
really.
I really appreciate it. You know, some of these questions I'm like, okay, what can I get from this guy? What can I learn? So, I really appreciate you coming on this show.
Well, I appreciate you guys too. Thank you very much for having me.
You've been listening to All Things Jazz here on T1 Radio, Pittsburgh's eclectic, positive, and underground Christian radio. Thank you.